Alright, this is the period, the Masoretic period. I think it's two S's here, Masoretic. AD 500 to 900. 10th century, somewhere around there. The Masoretes were the Jewish scholars who between AD 500 and AD 950 gave the final form to the text of the New Old Testament, which is what we have available for us today. The destruction of the temple in AD 70, along with the dispersion of the Jews from their land, became a powerful impetus to standardize the consonantal text. In other words, the text of Hebrew in just consonants and no vowels. Less glare here. So, and two, to standardize the punctuation and the use of vowels, vowel markings, to preserve correct vocalization and pronunciation for reading. They were called the Masoretics because they preserved in writing the oral tradition, marorah, concerning the correct vowels and accents, and the number of occurrences of rare words of unusual spellings that received unpointed, comparable to English without vowels, consonantal text of the Sopherim, and inserted the vowel points that gave to each word its exact pronunciation in grammatical form. They even engaged in a moderate amount of textual criticism. Wherever they suspected that the word is indicated by the consonantal text was erroneous, they corrected it in a very ingenious way. Just to be double sure, they left the actual consonants undisturbed, as they had received them from the Sopherim, but they inserted vowel points that belonged to the new word they were substituting for the old, and then inserted the consonants of the new word itself in very small letters in the margin. So you can go back and check it later. That's why you have such a good Hebrew text. There were two major schools of centers of Masoretic activity, each largely independent of the other, the Babylonian and the Palestinian. The most famous Masoretes were the Jewish scholars living in Tiberias in Galilee, Moses ben Asher with his son Aaron, and Moses ben Naphtali in the late 9th and 10th centuries. The Ben Asher text is in the standard Hebrew text today and is best represented by Codex Leningradensis B19 and the Aleppo Codex. So the Masoretes accepted the laborious job of editing the text and standardizing it, the headquarters being in Tiberias. The text which the Masoretes concluded with is called the Masoretic text. The resultant text had vowel points added in order to ensure proper pronunciation, and that's the standard Hebrew text today. They were well disciplined and treated the text with the greatest imaginable reverence and devised a complicated system of safeguards against scribal slips. They counted, for example, the number of times each letter of the alphabet occurs in each book. They pointed out the middle letter of the Pentateuch and the middle letter of the whole Hebrew Bible, and made each more detailed calculations than these. Everything countable seems to be counted, says Wheeler Robinson, and they made up mnemonics by which the various totals might be readily remembered. Sir Frederick Kenyon says, besides recording varieties of reading, tradition, or conjecture, the Masoretes undertook a number of calculations which do not enter into the ordinary sphere of textual criticism. They numbered the verses, words, and letters of every book. They calculated the middle word and the middle letter of each. They enumerated verses which contain all the letters of the alphabet, or a certain number of them, and so on. These trivialities, as we may rightly consider them, had yet the effect of securing minute attention to the precise transmission of the text. And they are but an excessive manifestation of a respect for the sacred scriptures, which in itself deserves nothing but praise. The Masoretes were indeed anxious that not one jot or tittle, nor not one smallest letter, nor one tiny part of a letter of the law should pass away or be lost. A factor that runs throughout the above discussion of the Hebrew manuscript evidences is in the Jewish reverence for the scriptures. With respect to the Jewish scriptures, however, it was not scribal accuracy alone that guaranteed their product. Rather, it was their utmost superstitious reverence for the Bible. According to the Talmud, There were even specifications not only for the kind of skins to be used in the sides of the columns, but the scribe was even required to perform a religious ritual before writing the name of God. Rules governed the kind of ink used, dictated the spacing of words, and prohibited wording anything from memory. The lines and even the letters were counted methodically. If a manuscript was found to contain even one mistake, it was discarded and destroyed. This scribal formalism was responsible, at least in part, for the extreme care exercised in copying the scriptures. It was also for this reason that there were only a few manuscripts, because the rules demanded the destruction of defective copies. So Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian, in the 1st century, writes, "We have given practical proof of our reverence for our own scriptures. For although such long ages have now passed, no one has ventured either to add or to remove or to alter a symbol, and it is an instinct with every Jew from the day of his birth to regard them as the decrees of God, to abide by them, and if need be, cheerfully to die for them. Time and again, ere now the sight has been witnessed of prisoners enduring tortures and death in every form in the theaters, rather than utter a single word against the laws and the allied documents." So Josephus continues by making a comparison between the Hebrew respect for Scripture and the Greek regard for their literature. What Greek would endure as much for the same cause? Even to save the entire collection of his nation's writings from destruction, he would not face the smallest personal injury. For the Greeks, they are mere stories, improvised according to the fancy of their authors. And in this estimate, even of the older historians, they are quite justified. When they see some of their own contemporaries venturing to describe events in which they bore no part, without taking the trouble to seek information from those who know the facts. Quotations and observations on the reliability of the Old Testament. So, there's a brilliant observation by Robert Dick Wilson. It takes the veracity and trustworthiness of Scripture back to Old Testament times. He says, in 144 cases of transliteration from Egyptian, Assyrian, Babylonian, and Moabite into Hebrew, and in 40 cases of the opposite, or 184 in all, the evidence shows that for 2,300 to 3,900 years, the texts of the proper names in the Hebrew Bible have been transmitted with the most minute accuracy. That the original scribe should have written them with such close conformity to correct philological principles is a wonderful proof of their thorough care and scholarship. Further, that the Hebrew text should have been transmitted by copyists through so many centuries is a phenomena unequaled in the history of literature. Wilson adds, there are about 40 of these kings living from 2000 to 400 BC. Each appears in chronological order. With reference to the kings of the same country and with respect to the kings of other countries, no stronger evidence for the substantial accuracy of the Old Testament records could possibly be imagined than this collection of kings. Mathematically, is one chance in 750, I don't even know there's a word for that, billions, trillions, that this accuracy mere circumstance. Because of the evidence, Wilson concludes, the proof that the copies of the original documents have been handed down with substantial correctness for more than 2,000 years cannot be denied. That the copies in existence 2,000 years ago had been in like manner handed down from the originals is not merely possible, but, as we have shown, is rendered probable by the analogies of Babylonian documents now existing, of which we have both originals and copies thousands of years apart, and of scores of papyri which show, when compared with our modern editions of the classics, that only minor changes of the text have taken place in more than 2,000 years, and especially by the scientific and demonstrable accuracy with while the proper spelling in the names of kings and of the numerous foreign terms embedded in the Hebrew text has been transmitted. So, F.F. Bruce states that the consonantal text of the Hebrew Bible, which the Masoretes edited, had been handed down to their time with conspicuous fidelity over a period of nearly 1,000 years. William Green concludes that it may safely be said that no other work of antiquity has been so accurately transmitted. Concerning the accuracy of the transmission of the Hebrew text, Atkinson, who was under librarian of the library at Cambridge University, says it is a little short of miraculous. Rabbi Akiba, 2nd century AD, with a desire to produce an exact text, is credited with saying that the accurate transmission in Masoret of the text is offense for the Torah. Now we look at the quantity of manuscripts. Even though the Old Testament does not boast of the same quantity of manuscripts as the New, the number of manuscripts available today is quite remarkable. Several reasons have been suggested for the scarcity of early Hebrew manuscripts. The first and most obvious reason is a combination of antiquity and destructibility. 2,000 to 3,000 years is a long time to expect ancient documents to last. Nonetheless, several lines of evidence support the conclusion that their quality is very good. First, it is important to establish the quantity of manuscripts available. There are several important collections of Hebrew manuscripts today. The first collection of Hebrew manuscripts, made by Benjamin Kennicott and published by Oxford, listed 615 of the Old Testament. Later, Giovannet de Rossi published a list of 731. The most important manuscript discoveries in modern times are those of the Cairo Geniza and the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 and following years. In the Cairo synagogue, attic, a Geneza, or storehouse, for old manuscripts was discovered. 200,000 manuscripts and fragments, some 10,000 of which are biblical, were found. Near the end of the 19th century, many fragments from 6th to 8th centuries were found in an old synagogue in Cairo, Egypt, which had been St. Michael's Church until AD 82. They were found there in a Geniza, a storage room, where worn or faulty manuscripts were hidden until they could be disposed of properly. This Geniza had apparently been walled off and forgotten until its recent discovery. In this small room, as many as 200,000 fragments were preserved, including biblical text in Hebrew and Aramaic. The Bible fragments date from the 5th century AD. Of the manuscripts found in Cairo, Geniza, about one half are now housed in Cambridge University. The rest are scattered throughout the world. Cairo Geniza's authority, Paul Kelly, has identified more than 120 rare manuscripts prepared by the Babylonian group of Masoretic scribes. The largest collection of Hebrew Old Testament manuscripts in the world is the second Firkowitz collection in Leningrad. It contains 1,582 items of the Bible and Masorah on parchment, plus 1,200 additional Hebrew manuscript fragments in the Antonin collection. Cayley contends also that these Antonin collection manuscripts and fragments are all from the Cairo Geniza. In the Firkowitz collection are found 14 Hebrew Old Testament manuscripts from between the years AD 929 and AD 1121 that originated in the Cairo Geniza. So Cairo Geniza manuscripts are scattered all over the world. Some of the better ones in the United States are in the NLO Memorial collection at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. The British Museum catalog lists 161 Hebrew Old Testament manuscripts. At Oxford University, the Bodleian Library catalog lists 146 Old Testament manuscripts, each containing a large number of fragments. Goshen Gottschenstein estimates that in the United States alone there are tens of thousands of Semitic manuscript fragments, about 5% of which are biblical, more than 500 manuscripts. The most significant Hebrew Old Testament manuscripts date from between the 3rd century BC and the 14th century AD. Of these, the most remarkable manuscripts are those of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which date from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD. They include one complete Old Testament book, Isaiah, and thousands of fragments, which together represent every Old Testament book except Esther. So the Dead Sea Scrolls manuscripts are highly significant because they confirm the accuracy of other manuscripts dated much later. For example, Cairo Codex is the earliest Masoretic manuscript prior to the Dead Sea Scrolls discoveries. It is now located in the British Museum. Also called Codex Caranisus, it was produced by the Masoretic Moses Ben Asher family and contains both the latter and former prophets. The rest of the Old Testament is missing from it. And then we have Codex of the Prophets of Leningrad. It contains Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the 12 minor prophets. The earliest complete MS of the Old Testament is the Codex Babylonicus Petropolitanus, located in Leningrad. It was perhaps prepared from a corrected text of Rabbi Aaron ben Moses, Ben Asher, before AD 1000. And we have the Aleppo Codex, extremely valuable manuscript. It was once thought lost, but in